Most people never notice who is watching them online because attention naturally flows toward noise, not silence, and that blind spot is exactly why silent observers are so often misunderstood, because when someone sees everything, reacts to nothing, and reveals almost nothing, your brain assumes passivity, weakness, or disinterest, but psychology shows the opposite is often true, and once you understand what's actually happening, you start realizing why these people are harder to read, harder to influence, and harder to manipulate. The truth is, watching without revealing is not accidental behavior, it's a psychological position, and research shows it's often linked to higher self-awareness, emotional regulation, and social intelligence, because when someone doesn't rush to react, post, or perform, they are operating from observation instead of validation, and your brain usually confuses quiet with absence, when in reality silence is often presence without display. Psychology explains this through a concept called information asymmetry, which means when one person knows more than they reveal, they hold subtle power, because humans feel most comfortable when information feels balanced and predictable, but the silent observer breaks that balance. They see patterns, reactions, habits, insecurities without exposing their own, which gives them an internal map of people without handing out their own, and this is why people feel slightly uneasy around someone who knows but doesn't share. Another important concept here is emotional regulation, because posting, reacting, and performing online constantly releases emotion outward, but observers contain it. Psychology shows that people who regulate instead of discharge emotion tend to think more clearly under pressure. They don't let impulses decide behavior, and they don't leak reactions that others can use against them. This doesn't mean they feel less, it means they choose when expression is useful and when silence is safer. There is also a deep connection to identity security, because when someone knows who they are, they don't need to signal it repeatedly. Your brain usually seeks identity confirmation through reactions, feedback, and engagement, but when that need is low, behavior becomes quieter. Research links this to internal validation, which means worth is generated internally, not outsourced socially, and this is why silent observers rarely overexplain, overshare, or seek reassurance. They don't need external proof to feel solid. Social psychology also explains this through the observer effect. People behave differently when they know they're being watched, but silent observers remove themselves from performance, which allows them to see people unfiltered. They notice contradictions, tone shifts, ego patterns, and power plays, because they're not busy managing their own image, and over time this builds a kind of social clarity that loud participation often destroys. This is where most people misunderstand the silence, because they think silence equals lack of confidence, but psychology shows confidence doesn't announce itself, it stabilizes, and people who reveal little often do so because they understand exposure creates vulnerability, not strength. Every reaction you give teaches people where your buttons are, and silence keeps those buttons hidden. So when someone watches everything and reveals nothing, understand that it's rarely fear, it's strategy, boundaries, and awareness. They are not disconnected, they are gathering, they are not passive, they are selective, and psychology shows that people who control information control interactions more than those who constantly express themselves. If this felt familiar, comment observer below, and if you want more psychology that decodes quiet behavior and invisible power, subscribe, because understanding people starts with understanding what they choose not to show.